Good morning, top of the hour, 10 o'clock on this Wednesday. Welcome to Ask the Theologian. I'm Randy White, and we take your biblical, theological, and worldview questions. We try to give them a rightly divided answer. We mix in a little humor. We chase a few rabbits. We have a little sarcasm. We offend one and all. Equal opportunity offender here today. Glad you're here. Tonight, we study the Gospel of John. Looking forward to being in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of John tonight. That'll be fun because, hey, the passage we're looking at tonight is that passage in John chapter 14 that says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, he shall do also, and greater works than these he shall do, because I go to my Father, and whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, and the Father, that the Father may be glorified in the Son." Some of these spectacular promises, we're going to look at them tonight and see what's up with that. That's 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I look forward to seeing you there. Let's go to Buckinghamshire and begin today with Ash's question, which came in yesterday. What did Peter mean when he said that Jesus preached the gospel to the spirits that they might be judged according to man, but live in the Spirit of God? Was this a chance for them? I don't think it was a chance for them. I think it was not a proclamation in the sense of, as we might, share the good news, as I did on Resurrection Sunday this last week, but rather a different kind of proclamation. And let's see, let's look at, I believe we're referring to 1 Peter chapter 9, verse 19, by which it is, let's back to verse 18. "For Christ hath also once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which." Now, that tells us that whether he went physically or can you even go there physically, it looked like it is by the Spirit in which he went. We could debate that another day. It's not all that germane to the question, but certainly he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. Now, let's take this verse 19 and let's open up the treasury of scripture knowledge and do a little scripture comparison here, cross references on 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 19. The Spirit by which he went and preached. Okay. Most of these references, I believe, are just going to be to the Spirit himself. The sent to you, the Holy Ghost sent to you. The gospel was preached also to them that are dead. Okay, 1 Peter 4:6, we also want to compare with 1 Peter 3:19 to make sure we get the full story here. "For this cause the gospel was preached also unto them that are dead, that they might be judged according to the men of the flesh," which is actually the reference in which Ash is making. And so we want to get there and check that. But let's go ahead and check out Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 30. "Yet many years didst thou forbear and testifiest against them by the Spirit." Okay, just some similarities there that are given. So first of all, let's make note that in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 19, these spirits in prison are the spirits that created the Nephilim. And he's certainly not giving them an opportunity. Now, that's where I started out in the question. Then I realized, wait, that's not the one that Ash is asking about. So, I could just sense Ash over in Buckinghamshire saying, no, I'm talking about the other one. So we got there. Okay. So here, spirits in prison, these are evil spirits. No gospel mention. There's a proclamation there. Now let's go to 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 6, and let's back up again just a bit so we can give Some context here, who shall give an account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. Now, I think what you've got here is a couple of ways to interpret this. And that is, again, the gospel was preached to them that are dead. You can take that, and you might, with 1 Peter chapter 2 in mind, say, well, he went and preached to spirits in prison, and so he preached to them that are dead. You can take it that way, that somehow them that are dead got a second chance while they were dead in order to hear the gospel. You can take it that way. Let's double check the Greek and make sure that you can take it that way in the Greek. I suppose you can, but I want to check this. For to this end also to the dead were the glad tidings announced, or the glad tidings were announced to the dead, in order that they might be judged. Indeed, as regards men in the flesh. Okay, I think we've got a fairly straightforward interpretation or translation. I don't see any real issues there. For this also to the dead men was good news. Okay, there's one possibility here. In fact, I am going to say, even though I might not take this interpretation in the end, I'm going to say that it looks to me like the emphasis would be on the dead. Sometimes you have to go with what the text actually says rather than with what you want it to say. And what I want it to say, I'll explain in just a moment. The text probably does not fully favor what I want it to say. But it might, I don't think it rules out what I want to say. It just emphasizes something different. Let's get into it. That's the standard interpretation, is what it emphasizes here. To this end, also to the dead were the glad tidings announced. Now, remember, we've talked about it before, that in Greek, the word order tells what you're emphasizing. Now, I would have expected it really kind of like we've got in English over here, because it's better English, that the gospel was preached to the dead. But this is to the dead, the gospel was preached. To whom? To the dead. That's to whom the gospel was preached. Now, the plain sense of that seems to be that the gospel was preached to dead people. Now, that is the plain sense of that, but then we have to come in, as Ash is sort of implying in his question here, saying, how do you preach the gospel to dead people? What's going on? In this preaching the gospel to dead people. By the way, Ash, in your question, you have said that Jesus preached the gospel to the spirits so that they might be judged. I want to question the assumption on your questions a little bit. I'm not sure. We'd have to check I'm not a 1 Peter expert. We'd have to check this. Did Jesus preach, and was it spirits? Okay. Somehow the gospel was preached. That's what we've got in this verse anyway. Ash may be right in the overall context here. But I want to question that assumption. You might be mixing chapter 2 verse, 19 was it? In with chapter 4 verse 6 and putting those together, and you got lions laying down with lambs. So somebody preached the gospel to the dead. Now, is that like it sounds? It does sound like that. The Greek seems to say that, but could it be a means of saying, hey, even people who are dead had the gospel preached to them? Now, it doesn't say when the gospel was preached to them. The text does not require that glad tidings were announced to them while they were dead. it so happens that they were dead. So we could take, let's say, a fella like Samson, and let's apply this to Samson. Okay. For this cause, the gospel was preached to Samson, who's now dead. Samson is dead, no doubt about it. And the gospel was preached to Samson, that he might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to the Spirit, according to God in the Spirit. Could that be true that the dead people, when they heard the gospel, they weren't dead? They were very much alive. Now they're dead. And so the question that he speaks to is, hey, what about those who are dead? What about those who have gone on before? Now, again, I would want to take the context. If I'm going to take that assumption, and that's the assumption I want to take, is that when the gospel was preached to them, they were very much alive. Just so happens they're dead now. Is there anything in the context that would support my assumption? I don't know. Obviously, we would have to go a little more in depth at it. And as I already mentioned, I'm not yet an expert on 1 Peter. Give me time. I'm working on Paul right now. Which gospel are we talking about? I use the example of Samson, that obviously it's not that the Pauline gospel was preached unto Samson in order that he might, be judged according to men in the flesh, not be judged according to, that they might be judged. Yeah, I'll get it right. They might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. Now, that's kind of interesting what he says, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh. But live. It almost looks like it's saying, hey, because of when you lived, you're going to be judged according to men in the flesh. That's the judgment you're going to have. But knowing that this is the judgment that comes with this gospel, you can be judged according to the flesh so that you might in the future live according to God in the Spirit. That's to say, you might make it into the kingdom. Now, I think to make this, it's a complicated passage here, but what we have to do is say that this is almost certainly the kingdom gospel that was preached, or might we say the gospel under the dispensation of the law. That's what was preached to them. That's what was preached to them while they were alive. So a Samson, a Joshua, a David, pick a Zechariah, pick whoever you want, Joshua the high priest, whatever. All those people, while they were alive, had the gospel preached to them. Not the Pauline gospel, more of what would be considered the kingdom gospel, the gospel of the kingdom, but I think that even has an aspect that hadn't come quite at their day, so it's the gospel of the law. There really was some good news in the law. The good news was that you could bring a sacrifice. You knew exactly what was required of you, and you could bring a sacrifice when you didn't measure up to that which is required of you, and you could carry that out. So that good news was preached to them which are now dead, in order that they might be judged according to men in the flesh. They've got the standard of the gospel. They know what the standard of the gospel is. And that would allow them then to live according to God in the Spirit. Now, notice King James here does not put a capital Spirit. So even in their day, you could put, in Samson's spirit, he could live according to God. But he didn't. So the bottom line on that, Ash, is I think that we can take that passage and say, maybe there's a hint that somehow the Lord went and, took captivity captive, and he went and proclaimed to the saints that had gone on before about the Pauline gospel, and they were saved. I don't see that. I have a hard time seeing that. One is when we always say the collective we that doesn't include most of us. We always say, well, Jesus he did that during the burial. Well, that was long before the Pauline revelation. And so can you have the Pauline gospel preached even by Jesus when he is in his burial? I just don't see it. I don't see how to make that happen. So I think there's too much working against it. I think the fact that here we've got Peter, here we've got him talking, at best, he's talking about the time of the burial of Jesus Christ, during those days of burial. And possibly he's talking about actually the proclamation that had been given all the way down through the years for those people who are now dead. I think that even though the grammar does lend itself to saying they were preached to while they were dead, it doesn't require that, and that brings up so many theological problems that there we have issues. Almost what that does is say, at each change of the dispensation, people who are already dead had their dispensational criteria changed, which would then, it would seem, give them an opportunity, give people in hell, who are destined to hell, an opportunity. Rather than living according to the dispensation that was at hand for them, they didn't. Let's take a Korah in the Old Testament. Korah didn't live according to the dispensation at hand. He died and he went to torment in Sheol. He's in Sheol until Jesus comes and says, hey, now we're offering this new thing. It's by grace through faith, not of works. It's your sins are not being counted against you. It's whosoever will may come. Would you like to? And Korah says, yeah, I would like to. And so he spent all those years in torment. And now then he has this opportunity. And that sort of undoes all of the dispensational truth of those past ages. I think that becomes pretty problematic for dispensationalism as a cause. And so I think I would not take the standard interpretation on that in the end, in final analysis. And thanks for the question, Ash. I appreciate that. Just noticed a comment from yesterday. We were talking about widgets. Remember, Russell? Is that similar to a gadget? It's similar to a whatchamacallit, actually. It's more like a whatchamacallit. But a gadget, yeah, yeah, gadget. I think that might work. This is from yesterday also. Cheyenne with Clint Walker is running in syndication. You know, I'm in the 5th season of The Rifleman, and it only has 5 seasons. I'm at the beginning of the 5th, and that was in the day when, you know, Hollywood actually worked. And so, you know, now a season is like 8 episodes. Then a season was like 35 episodes. So it'll be a while before I finish season 1 because, you know, I don't watch one every single day. But I've been thinking about Cheyenne. I don't know. Someone will have to tell me if it's worth watching. It's the old, you know, the old series, Cheyenne. My grandparents lived in Cheyenne. Did I tell you that? Used to go there every summer, checking on them. Let's see here. We've got a question from, trying to get these in order here, from Linda in Lexington. Why do so many people come out of charismania and go straight into Calvinism? Is it the structure? Again, I'll say, I've said so many times, why questions are the hardest ones to answer. In fact, let me add to this just a little bit. There are some kind of, shall we say, predictable patterns. People that come out of Catholicism often go into charismania. Very often, charismatic churches are filled with former Catholics. And so why do Catholics, if they convert, tend to convert towards charismatic theology? Why do charismatics, when they convert out of charismania, why do they tend to go to Calvinism? I suppose on all 3 of those that there are some things that are lacking in the first that they find in the second. And so it looks like a little bit of a utopia for them. First of all, for Calvinism, there are, I would say that Calvinism has not much answer to the charismatic issue. Within Calvinism, you've got charismatic Calvinists like a Wayne Grudem, or you've got non-charismatic Calvinists, and probably they would call themselves Calvinists who believe in continuationism, or Calvinists who don't believe in continuation. They believe in cessationism. Now, they don't have a strong argument because the only strong argument comes from dispensationalism. But maybe it is because charismatic groups tend to be pretty shallow. And after a while of shallow, a person gets tired of it. They want something more substance. Calvinist groups tend to be pretty deep. Not right necessarily, but pretty deep. And they're not strongly against charismatic. So a charismatic doesn't feel uncomfortable. They might feel a little, say, unusual because people aren't, shouting, speaking in tongues, all that kind of stuff in most Calvinist churches. Even those who believe in continuationism, like Wayne Grudem, I doubt he jumps a pew and speaks in tongues out in the open and all that kind of stuff. So they're not welcome. I don't think they would be not welcome anywhere if they're willing to study the theology. But there's no even sense that they're not welcome, because there's no teaching against charismatic theology in a Calvinist setting. So I'm looking for something deep. I don't want to get hit over the head with your big King James Bible about how speaking in tongues is wrong. And maybe even if they realize it wrong, they're saying, I just don't want to be preached about it. And so Calvinism fits for them, perhaps. In the Catholic faith, the Catholics tend to be somewhat, let me say that better. Catholics are mystical, and I started to say that way too lightly. Catholics are mystical, and charismatics are mystical. And when a Catholic realizes, hey, wait, there's a bunch of sacerdotalism and weird things going on here, that's not biblical, I'm going to move away from that. But they like the mystical, and so they go into the charismatic faith there. Probably. Again, why is a difficult thing? Maybe somebody else might answer it and say, well, I tell you why Catholics go into charismatic faiths. That's because there's more charismatic churches in Catholic communities, which is very true. You go to our community, for example, outside of the Catholic churches, it's going to be the charismatic churches that are the strongest. And so if a Catholic is just searching for something, look around. Look, here's the, Assembly of Praise on the lake, and yeah, I'm gonna do that one. And then across the board, Calvinist churches are pretty strong. So maybe by default is where you go there, just because that's whom they're most of, is a possibility. Do I have that right? I don't know, but it's a possibility through it all. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate that. That was yesterday's questions. Now to today's questions. We've got Manny in San Antonio. What does it mean when a pastor says a fallen world or a cursed world? And is this why there's so much evil and death in the world? Thanks again. I appreciate you, Manny. I do think that the answer to evil, suffering, death, sickness in the world is the fallen world we live in, or the cursed world we live in. Now, what does that mean? That means that we have a world structure which is always going to tend toward evil. It is always going to tend toward sickness and death and dying. And you're going to have to work very hard to push that back. Let me give you an example in gardening. If gardening was easy, we would all have one. But gardening's not easy. Especially if you don't have a plot already prepared, you're going to spend weeks getting the ground even to the point where you could plant something in it and get something out of it. It's not just this natural kind of thing that everybody can just go out and say, oh, yes, I'm going to have a backyard garden and go buy some seeds and put them in and, they start growing. People who have a garden work that garden day in and day out. They don't get a vacation because they got the tomatoes. They are working it hard. Now, why do they have to work it so hard? Because it's under a curse. The ground itself is cursed. That is to say that God has changed the natural order and changed it in such a way that it no longer produces bountifully like it would like to produce. It will produce bountifully, but you are going to have to work by the sweat of your brow to get it to do so. It is always going to fight against you. Now, take that on a larger scale. And I think that's true not only with dirt, but it's true with humanity. It's true with all of the forces of nature even. That we had a tree yesterday. It was really blowing. The wind was blowing. I don't like wind, but it was blowing yesterday. And it blew a tree over, one of several hundred, since we live in the mountains. Fortunately, it wasn't near anything and whatnot, but it blew over and now it's leaning against another tree and I got to figure out, how do I get this tree down, gently. That's what I want to do. Get the tree. So even when you got everything fixed up and ready to go and everything's perfect, then comes the wind. Then comes a cyclone. Then comes an earthquake. Then comes a fire. Then comes a tornado. Then comes whatever it is. The natural world is just working against you. So it's the dirt, it's meteorology, it's our own DNA that it eventually something is going to go awry, and we're going to get the flu. I guess that's eradicated, isn't it? We're going to have a heart attack. We're going to catch some cancer, whatever it is. Why is it that nothing's easy? Why is it that we're 3 steps forward, or 2 steps forward, 3 steps back? We can't make any forward progress. It is because all of the world is under a curse. That curse comes from God. That curse limits life. That curse, in that sense, is blessed that it limits life. And that curse is what has to be done away with. And when the curse is gone, then this world will not be filled with evil and death. This world will not be filled with all that which tends against us. So, can we live a life which is not just overwhelmed by evil and death? Yeah, I think we can. We make some good choices. We work hard. We constantly push. I don't really like the term because it's so often misused, but we push against the darkness, so to speak. We push back the darkness. The darkness is the curse there. And yet all along we recognize it's the curse. Let me add, excuse me, just one bit about this. There is natural revelation. Natural revelation is, hey, look around, you see there is a God. There definitely is a God. But if you do not have specific revelation, that is the revelation that comes from the printed Word of God, you don't know God. Because you're looking at a world today, let's say you're studying gardening, and you're trying to figure out God in gardening. Well, what you would figure out by God is, hey, He created this world this world wants me to starve. The world He created, He wants me to starve. Therefore, God must be very angry. God must want me to starve. And you would develop a theology based upon what you see scientifically, and it would be a bad theology. because you have to know that what you're looking at has been changed from its original. It has been cursed from its original. And without the scripture, you don't know that. I don't know, apologetics, and I'm not a huge apologetics fan, but apologetics, I think they talk about presuppositionalism is one approach to apologetics, and there's a lot of, I don't know enough of the argument to know what I'm talking about here, but I do know that I've argued against some very strong anti-presuppositionalists before. And what I've argued is, hey, if you don't have revelation from the outside in the Word of God, then you do not have the truth. You are looking at something that is going to lead you on a wild goose chase, because you've got to have this specific presupposition which only comes from the Word of God. Now, I don't know if that's totally what presuppositionalism is, and it doesn't completely relate to the question there, but that's the idea of this cursed world, going back to Genesis chapter 3. Now let's hit Michael in Rancho Cucamonga. All aboard! Rancho? Nope. Anaheim? I got to memorize that better. Anaheim? There's another place? And Cucamonga! I have heard it said that people who died before Christ went either to the good part or the bad part of hell. Yet Moses and Elijah, who certainly died before Christ, appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are I agree with the totality of it all. So people who died before Christ, let's take Moses and Elijah. Where did they go? They went to, the Hebrew word would have been Sheol. Sheol, the Greek word was Hades. Hades was often defined as hell. Hell, especially in its King James usage and in that day of 17th century, hell meant the beyond, the unknown, that which is behind the veil. That's kind of what Sheol meant. That's kind of what Hades meant. So they didn't go to hell as in the lake of fire, because the lake of fire does not have a good part to it. But they went to Hades, or Sheol, or hell was the right word at the time, in 1611. So that's where they went. Now, bring up a good point here. Moses and Elijah, it's where they went, with some exception here. I'm going to ignore the exception, but I'm going to tell you the exception first, but then I'm going to pretend like there's not an exception. How's that? Remember Elijah, you said Elisha. Actually, it was Moses and Elijah, that appeared before the Lord. And so Elijah took the chariot to heaven. So did Elijah go into Sheol? Doesn't look like it. Looks like he missed that, him and Enoch, I suppose. Moses is questionable. Where was his body? There was that fighting, Michael the archangel and Satan fighting over his body. That's a little weird. What's going on there? So maybe you've got some exceptions there to say, well, I think both of these physically were transformed into heaven, or translated into heaven, or ascended or raptured into heaven. They were physically taken by Michael the archangel, by the sweet chariot that swung low. They got there to heaven, so they didn't really go to Sheol. There's a possibility of saying that. But that said, let's pretend like there wasn't that possibility. Let's just pretend like Moses and Elijah, or we could, we can't pick someone else because they didn't appear on the Mount of Transfiguration. But let's pretend like they didn't go. They didn't go to heaven. They went to Sheol. Could they still have appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration? I think yes. Not that the good part of Hades was emptied out. Some people have this view, I don't, that the good part of Hades was emptied out and is now in heaven. I don't hold to that. But, the good part of Hades or Sheol, still there, still awaiting the resurrection. does that prohibit them from coming back and walking this earth again like Moses and Elijah did on the Mount of Transfiguration? I don't think so. Number of reasons why. I'll give you two examples. One, if we just take Lazarus in view. Lazarus went somewhere. I don't have a problem with Lazarus going into hell as we used it in the King James, Hades, Sheol. He went there. And 4 days later, he came forth and he walked on the earth. Jesus had supper with him, all those kind of things. So, yeah, certainly that issue right there, that possibility right there. But remember also, remember the witch at Endor? And Saul coming to the witch at Endor, remember, put on his Halloween costume, went to the witch at Endor, and had her conjure up the spirit of Samuel. And when Samuel came forth, the witch at Endor freaked out. I think it's because the witch at Endor was a fake, and she had never conjured up a spirit before. She was a fake that was pretty good at saying, "Oh, I sense the deceased, the spirit of the deceased is here. Yes, yes. Oh, she smells like lilac perfume. Did your granny wear lilac perfume?" And you know, she was just, shall we say, gifted at a bag full of lies. But when Samuel actually came forth, she freaked out. She screamed. She's like, "Whoa, this ain't the fake stuff." Looks to me like Samuel actually came from Sheol to the witch at Endor and gave a message to Saul, which was not a good news message. Now, if that can happen to Samuel from Sheol, then Moses, Elijah, again, whatever we do with those, with the exceptions, or Lazarus, or whatever, I don't think that going to Sheol prohibits God, if he wants to bring them forth and let them carry out a particular issue. Now, I don't think he's doing it today, by the way. I believe in an age of silence, and that we don't have, spirits walking among us. Thank you, Valerie, for noticing my great skills at conjuring up stupidity. My new calling. I said this, it's been several months since I said this, so I'll go ahead and say it again. But I'm thinking, because Taos, I live in a community that's just fascinated by the stupid. And so, you got the fortune teller down there, Madam somebody, and we have in the summertime, it's about to start up, I imagine probably 1st of May or so, the farmer's market every Saturday. Well, along with the farmer's market, you know how these things work. We do have farmers that bring their veggies and their goods and all that. But there's also, just a lot of, other stuff for sale, people's candles and, tea and things like that. And there's always a lady sitting there doing palm reading. And I'm just thinking, a little side gig. I could go down there, and I got the bald head for it. I need me kind of an Aladdin outfit or something, and I could go down there and, I don't know, I'll be a fortune teller, I'll conjure up spirits, I'll whatever. And I would do it totally with the purpose of faking people out of their money. Because I think a fool and his money shouldn't stay together. So let's just fake people out of their money. Now, doing so, I would want cameras, because this would just be too good to pass up. So, let's have a few cameras, and I'll conjure them. I think there's a narrow enough window of people's experiences that 80-90% of the time you can get there close enough. especially if, like a pastor, I've been a pastor all these years, if you're used to kind of listening to people, you can sort of pretty quickly discern, okay, I think I know where this guy's coming from. I know what his past is. I know what his heritage is. I know what his values then are going to be. I can put all this together, and you can spin a tale real quick. And then I would start a YouTube channel called, I don't know, The Fake Fortune Teller or something like this. And people would watch it, and at the end, I would come on and I would say, can you believe the charades that you can so easy? If you've got a bald head, you can do this. Bald head and a little bit of imagination. I say all that to say, probably don't have time to put up my booth on Saturdays. It would be so much fun, though. But people fall for stuff so quickly. It's so easily that it's shameful. Let's go to Ives. Ives, I am still holding your other question. I even this morning I said I'm going to get up and I'm going to study Ives' other question about the sons of God and the bride of God. I'm going to get there. But let's go to your new question here today, since Ives stays up well past midnight to watch us. Good morning to you. I want to ask a geopolitical question. Oh, I like geopolitical questions. Here we go. What's your most favorite, most conservative state in America? I'll guess either the Sunshine State of Florida or the Yeehaw State of Texas. I'm going to make my Floridian and Texan friends mad at me, and I'm going to make Ives wrong on the guess. I think this is a little of my take. Now, I lived for, 25 plus years in Texas, and it does have a conservative core to it. And I've got a daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandchildren, of course, in Florida. And it's also got, conservative leanings, I suppose you would say. But I don't think either Florida nor Texas are nearly as conservative as they think they are. Now, Texans especially, but Floridians as well, Texans and Floridians like the image of them as conservatives. But the state as a whole, let's talk Texas a little bit. The state as a whole, for those of you who are in Texas, I'll warn you, from an outsider's point of view now, I've been gone 6 years or so, it is not nearly as conservative as your brochure is saying. Remember that, now you got to have a little bit of age for this one, but remember that it was Texas who did produce Ann Richards. Remember Governor Ann Richards? He was born with a silver foot in his mouth. That's not conservative. Okay, there's a fluke. Had all sorts of conservative governors since, and yet those conservative governors were those like George W. Bush, who is not really conservative. The Speaker of the House, is it still the same guy from down in Houston? I've forgotten his name now. But the Republican Speaker of the House, he's no conservative, unless they've changed recently. I could be off on that. But at least the one that was Speaker of the House for a long time, he's no conservative. And Rick Perry, probably more conservative than George W. Bush was in his policies, is the longest serving governor that the state has ever had. Not a liberal, definitely, but I wouldn't call him, just a staunch conservative. Governor Abbott, I met Governor Abbott once before he was governor, and Rick Perry actually Rick Perry was right here, and now Governor Abbott was right there, there together at some powwow I went to. I don't remember. I'm sure they remember. But Governor Abbott is a little late to the call on, being the and maybe even the governor. What's his name? Rick Governor Rick down in Florida. We're on a first name basis. They both like to throw some candy towards the conservatives every now and then, so they look like conservatives, so they'll have a good political future. But neither one of them, to me, are that much of a conservative stalwart. They don't have enough conservative backbone, in my opinion. Now, granted, I'm, just a little bit more conservative than Attila the Hun, but I'd like to see them be more conservative. I'd like to see the state of Texas and the state of Florida be more conservative, more so than just, again, politically being nice to conservatives so that there's a political future there. I want them to show some real muscle, conservative muscle. I don't see them doing that much. I probably, for most conservative states in America, I probably would go to places like South Dakota. And now, was it South Dakota or North Dakota did produce Tom Daschles, again, back in the 80s? I would say Wyoming, although Wyoming has Liz Cheney. But I doubt it for long. I think Liz probably is headed to the unemployment line, which I think pays slightly more than Congress anyway. Because DeSantis, thank you, Governor DeSantis in Florida. I appreciate that. I had Santorini in my mind. I was like, it's not Governor Santorini. Kristi Noem in South Dakota, and I would say the state of South Dakota, has shown far more conservatism, say, in the last couple of years than probably any other state. Wyoming and Montana, every now and then they'll get their liberals, but for the most part, they're going to chase them out of town. Like I said, I don't think Liz Cheney will last. I think she got elected solely on her name and shouldn't have even gotten elected then, but there gets a lot of money in somebody with a name and all that, and it becomes a hard thing to deal with. But I would go up in that, what do you call that? The North Plains states, and say that's probably the most conservative places that you can go. And largely because there's not large cities up there. So anywhere in America you go, if you find a small town, it's going to be conservative. Politically conservative, socially conservative, fiscally conservative, Judeo-Christian values kind of conservative. And that's true even in the little states. You go up to New York State and find a small town out in, Western New York or something, it's going to be conservative. Very few little towns. Now, Taos is an exception. Every now and then you have, some weird thing that has taken place through history to bring it to that point. But I'm going to go for those states. Now, number 2, what's your least favorite, most progressive, liberal state in America? I'll guess California or New York. I think I'll go with you on that. California, I would be more familiar with than New York, but both of them are proud of their communism. And both of them, if I was a liberal, I guess I would do the same thing. They have, unlike most conservatives, they have used their liberal agenda to shape the nation. Now, a lot of other places, including, might I say Kristi Noem in South Dakota, she will take her conservative policies to say, right here in South Dakota, we're going to be free and conservative, but not use her strength beyond there. Now, Governor DeSantis recently, with this social media stuff, and I think Governor Abbott jumped on board later also, but Governor DeSantis came forward and, he's trying, I don't know how far they've gotten, but he's trying to say, hey, Twitter, if you want to do business in Florida, fine, but you do it according to our laws, and our laws require you some freedom. Now, that's really a wonderful strategy. I wish more conservative governors would do it, because let's take California for instance. California set all these consumer protection standards. It was all a ruse. It's all stupid. It's all ignorant. But they, and that's why everything you buy today, says, meets California standard 8 and SI, whatever, blah, 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 it gives you cancer and you're going to die. Every label you got in the United States, it's going to say something about California. Why? Because the California communists realized, hey, we can take and set some policies for California, and it's going to be too expensive for a company to have the California product and the rest of America product. And they're not going to give up on the California market, so they're going to set everything to go to the California market. So those of you in Texas have to abide by the absolutely stupid California policies. Might I say this is true in textbooks as well? In the history book. Well, it's a lot of money to write history of the United States. And California sets the standards and says, we the fascists only allow books that have our progressive agenda to be in our communist schools. And those schools get used in those books get used in South Dakota. They have used their political muscle in order to carry that. And liberals are not ashamed to do that at all. Conservatives are a little more, small government, freedom, and so they don't do that kind of stuff. And in not doing it, honestly, sadly, we're being trampled. So we're going to have to find some ways to fight fire with fire a little bit in that for the conservatives. Now, I might add, I'm here in New Mexico, and doesn't get the press and like a California or New York, because we simply don't have that many people here. I don't know if we have 2 million people in the state. Houston has more people than that. But the Bolshevik governor of New Mexico has taken some far, 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 far left policies. That might swing back a little bit. I hope it does. New Mexico and the governorship has kind of gone back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. The Republicans just stop progress, and the Democrats make it. And so then you get this far, you've got 4 years of Democrats that make it, and then the Republican governor stops it right there, and then you get another Democratic government, and they push it farther. Got, some of the most progressive. I don't think I like that word because it kills people. But the most leftist agendas of any state that our Bolshevik governor now has carried out, and shame on those who voted for her. So New Mexico, in terms of its policies recently, might be right up there in the most liberal. Number 3, your most favorite U.S. president and why? I like, let me give 2. I don't know. It's a hard thing. I, of course, came of age during the Reagan years. Ronald Reagan was the first president I ever voted for. I went to the 1984 Republican National Convention. It was held in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I volunteered there as a college student. All those balloons that dropped from the ceiling, we used to blow them up one at a time. And so a bunch of volunteers, and we were blowing all those things up. And I got a photo album around here somewhere, pictures, where I saw Ron and Nancy waving at everybody and all that kind of stuff. It was just thrilling as a 29, I guess I would have been 19. Let's see, how old was I? I was born in 65. That was 84. So, 19-year-old kid there, and, seeing the president and all that kind of stuff, was exciting. And Ronald Reagan was a longtime visionary. He was a long time, he had his ideology, and he didn't mess with the small stuff. He understood, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. He understood to go for the jugular, and he did that very, very well. Probably had he aimed at some of the small stuff, his impact would have been even stronger, because he didn't kill the deep state. And his predecessor and his vice president, George W. Bush, was king of the deep state, and would have been so much better, had much longer lasting legacy. He's probably the most beloved of all modern presidents. No, not even a probably. He is the most beloved of all modern presidents. I like a John Adams, though. John Adams and Donald Trump were a lot alike. John Adams was a man with a backbone. John Adams was a man who was ideologically driven like a Ronald Reagan. John Adams was a man who had a temper. I like a president who's got a temper every now and then. So John Adams, yeah, I'll go for those two. Your least liked president, you're saying, I'll guess Biden and Obama. I'm actually going to go Biden. I think it's too early to tell whether or not he's just a total nincompoop who will not do anything, which is our prayer. Lord, make the president to be a nincompoop and all those around him. But my least favorite is actually Jimmy Carter, because Jimmy Carter did some things that last to this day, and every one of them was bad, especially in the Middle East. The whole Middle East problem is Jimmy Carter's fault. I realize you could go back farther into the United Nations, but Jimmy Carter and the United Nations were married together. But Jimmy Carter really did institute some hellish policies for the Jewish people and some hellish policies for the Middle East, and created a mess over there. I would imagine in the Philippines that Jimmy Carter probably created a lot of the mess in the Philippines as well. Jimmy Carter was the king of pulling the rug on our allies in order to allow the leftists to go. Now, Biden and Obama, they learned from Jimmy Carter, they took the throw America under the bus kind of thing from Jimmy Carter as well. So that's fun talking politics. Thanks for your questions there. Better move on to Paul up in Wisconsin. King Wisconsin speaks about Romans chapter 3, verse 30. Let's read it. Seeing it is one God which shall justify the circumcision by faith and the uncircumcision through faith. The question is, why is the circumcision by faith and the uncircumcision through faith? By and through. Let's look at it again. One God, he shall justify the circumcision by faith, the uncircumcision through faith. Let's first of all look at the Greek and see if we can figure out anything. We have by is ek, out of faith, and the circumcision dia. So we get the word exit and diameter. Dia, to go right through. So both justify the circumcision, justify the uncircumcision. Both have faith involved. Justify by faith, justify through the faith. it is somewhat interesting that there's also a definite article in the second and not in the first. Now, let's see if by doing a little Greek search, we want to search ekpistos, by faith, out of faith. Let's see if we can find that exact. We can many, many times. Okay, this is the ek right there, ekpisteos, out of faith. Now, we're going to hold that there for just a moment, and we're going to then come, we'll have to do this two ways here, dia tes pisteos, through the faith. Let's just look up that exact. Okay, we've got a number of times there too. So now what I'm going to do is drag these over here somewhere. And we're looking at Romans chapter 3, verse 30. So let's go to chapter 3, verse 26. I think I'm able to, this may or may not cooperate with me, but let's see. If I go to 3:26, here we go. To declare, I say, at this time his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. Now, this is 3:26. Him which believeth, it looks like it is. Let's check this here and see where we get that. Him that ekpisteos, same issue there. Ekpisteos, so that out him that is of the faith of Jesus, out of the faith of Jesus, so to speak. Okay, interesting that's in 26, and then again right down here in verse 30. See if we can put those on the same screen. Him which believeth in Jesus, the circumcision by faith. Using that terminology. Okay, is there much difference there? Can we learn something there? Let's go to 4:16, close by. It is of faith that it might be grace to the end. Okay, of faith, it is out of faith. Could you argue that that's different than being through faith, or not necessarily? In fact, we've got it twice in 4:16. That which is also of the faith of Abraham, out of the faith of Abraham. That one you would expect ek to be there. Let's go to Romans chapter 5, verse 1. Therefore, being justified by faith. Now, that's interesting, because here we probably would argue that this is Pauline being justified ek pisteos, out of faith, by faith. Now that almost sounds, to go back to chapter 3, verse 30, justified by faith. And uncircumcision, that would be us, through faith, and yet you go to 5:1, and it looks like it's speaking of the uncircumcised, and it is by faith. Ekpisteo. I think what I'm trying to get at here, Paul, is that my suspicion is that if we go through all of these, we're going to find that by faith and through faith are somewhat used interchangeably. It's a different way of saying the same thing. Could we build that argument, or should we build the fact that no, it is different? Ekpisteos is different than diapisteos. They've got to be separate. Now, I'm a believer in verbal plenary inspiration, and that is to say that every word counts and every word has a doctrine in it. But I'm also a believer that we have, and the Greek language had, and the Hebrew language had, different words that did say the same thing. So the pursuit is, are these saying the same thing? And just for, can I say, literary reasons, it said them in two different ways. It sounds better to the ear, looks better on paper, all those kind of things that, I do a decent amount of editing. And when I do so, I say, let's change this word to that word. The writer never cares because it's like, that looks better. And when you look at the book, that's better. I think that's my argument, is that there's no difference here, ek or dia. Now, we would want to carry that out a little further and look into Romans. For example, we have in Romans 3:31, again, it's 3:30 that we have through faith. Do we then make the void the law through faith? Exactly the same issue here. Could we tie that together? That'd be a little interesting. Let's go to 3:25. As a matter of fact, 3:25, we have the dia. 3:26, we have the ek. God hath set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, and then to declare his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of him out of faith. So that's interesting, because 25 and 26 do seem to be talking about the same people here. And in verse 25, they are coming through faith. In verse 26, it is out of faith. Again, you could look at it, and what have we got here? We got 23 times it's ek, and 10 times it is dia. If you could, from dia and the comparison to ek, build a case that they're very different, I would go for it. I think what we're going to find is you would go through those 10 times of dia and say, that seems to be saying the same thing we got over here as ek. So why is it by faith for the circumcision and through faith for the uncircumcision? I think it is only a literary device. Now, I wouldn't take that as the final word. I wouldn't take anything that Randy White says as the final word, or anybody else says is the final word, other than the scripture. And sometimes, like on this case in the scripture, we have to do a lot of work and some study and some research on it to figure out, hey, is Randy White right there that there is no difference between by faith and through faith? Certainly it is a different word, but is there is there any difference? I'm trying to think of an example. I got here by planes, trains, and automobiles. I came, by car, through the car. We wouldn't actually say it that way, but, I came through the highway system. I out of, through. I think there's some degree of interchangeability, if you will, that comes in there. Let's chew on that and see if we can confirm that in any way. Just see what we can do here. Oh, I noticed Valerie, our Canadian friend. I'm not sure which movie she was talking about, but was talking about Reagan, in the movies. There's a movie that I've been wanting to see. A number of weeks ago, I didn't realize that there was a movie called We're in the Army Now. I knew the song, We're in the Army Now. But there's a movie called In the Army Now. Many of you probably were, at the opening. In the 1940s. It's a 40s movie. Just maybe in the midst of World War II. And Ronald Reagan had like a cameo part in there. He was probably a starting actor, and he's just reading a newspaper, that's all. I want to watch that sometime, but I'll finish The Rifleman first, and then I'll watch all of that. And Valerie would also like to know if she could make an appointment for Saturday morning for a poem reading. Oh, yes. If you have money, you can schedule your appointments because a fool and his money are soon departed. We could just have some fun with that, couldn't we? I need a, what do you call it, screen name or something like that. I don't know what, so you guys help me out. We'll come up with something. Thanks. Okay, sorry, I got questions sitting in the hopper. waiting for us. I see one there from Nicholas that is waiting, and another from Washington State up there. Oh, Kingdom question. That'll be fun. We'll get that early tomorrow. Russell has a question from the book of Job, and we'll hit you up. All those three will be first thing up tomorrow morning. Sorry about putting those off today. Tonight, again, John 14. Some interesting things tonight. These promises, whatsoever you ask in my name, that you shall receive, and you'll do greater works than I. That's 6 o'clock Mountain Time, which is, I don't know, middle of the morning for those of you in the UK. You can either get up and watch it live, or you can catch the archives. It's been wonderful having each one of you today, and glad to have you. The African Violets doing well. I need a better backdrop so you can see it. Maybe I need a plant that, a hanger that puts it there like that. I could wear it as a boutonniere. How's that? Thank you all for, maybe go with my fortune-telling garb. I'll have to work on that too. It's been fun being with you today. Thanks for joining us for Randy's Ridiculous Readings. Thanks, Russell. I appreciate that. It would be ridiculous. We shall see you soon. I so want to talk about what Nancy said about Colorado, the once great state of Colorado, and the Californication of Colorado. They all moved there, didn't they? Starting with Jim Dobson. And yeah, Californians and leftist politics destroyed what was a conservative state. And I think that, what I say, Colorado was the first to bring about legalization of recreational use of marijuana. It's all over the place now, but New Mexico is a little late to the game, just got there. What I see when I drive through small town Colorado, through places like, I don't know, Alamosa, which has still got some industry, Fort Garland, Trinidad. Jeff, I see you're here. Walsenburg. Those, when you drive through them, you can say there was once people who lived here who did something. They laid some bricks. They built some buildings. They obviously had some industry. Today, what you see is rundown areas and 2 or 3 marijuana houses. That doesn't bode well for the future. Those towns and then eventually the state, it kind of dries up if it cannot produce something. Talked yesterday about what I'd do with $10,000. I'd try to produce something. If you can't produce something other than marijuana, you don't have much of a future. And this is New Mexico's problem as well. At least some of your towns in Colorado, you can tell it once produced something. In New Mexico, you drive through and wonder if it ever produced anything. But you drive through there and you just say, the saddest words of tongue and pen are these sad words, what might have been. And some little conservative town out there, San Luis maybe, I don't know that that's conservative, but ought to say, we are going to become a liberal free zone. We're going to become a place that manufactures, grows, produces, and I think, the town would begin to thrive and produce some places for the future. As it is now, kids have to grow up and leave. really no other choice. Same in Taos, New Mexico. If they wanted to stay here, they couldn't afford to do so because the liberals have said, we don't allow houses to be built. And which means we don't get teachers. We don't get cashiers. We don't get nurses. We don't get postmen. We don't get, and when you don't get anything, eventually people say, I don't live there. This is what happens. It's liberal policies. I didn't mean to get into that, but it's Nancy's fault. Thanks, y'all, for being here with me. Oh, I saw a good one there. Randy the Magnificent. Do you think I need a tattoo? I don't know. Thanks for being with me. We'll see you tonight. God bless you.